It is Sean, Rysen, Zoe, and Danielle here to break down the gay liberation movement, specifically how the politicization of identity led to the genesis of this movement. In understanding the gay liberation movement, you have to understand the instability of the time period. When looking at through a theoretical lens, Douglas McAdams and the political process and the development of Black insurgency talks about the process of forming political movements and the instability of the political system caused in this era was important for the movement to begin. There was increased prospect for success when prevailing norms of the past few decades were in flux. The social world was in crisis as young people joined the countercultural movement and began to question everything their parents raised them with. This chaos is perfect for social movements, and the gay community began growing, and there began to be a common identity. One can think of queerness in a series. A series is a small social collective that unites people passively by their surroundings. In turn, it orients people's actions. San Francisco and Greenwich Village were centers for the gay community. People existed here passively with this common identity of queerness. While not yet organized, there was an unorganized groupness ready to be primed. Without this seriality, it would be extremely hard for them to organize into a movement. There was also the importance of cross-movement solidarity. This had a shattering effect on the status quo, and it becomes evident, but McAdam helps us understand that cross-movement solidarity increases their power and decreases the discrepancy between those currently in power and the insurgency. As McAdams would say, the system broke down, and the community began to assert their rights. It literally lost legitimacy through the activism against police as they had deteriorating power, but it also figuratively broke down as systems of thought eroded with massive legal and cultural shifts. In examining identity and the birth of the gay liberation movement, you have to understand the disruption of the time. Traditional systems of power were weak and vulnerable as new collectives of people opposed prevailing norms and by nature of their group. The gay liberation movement came from a window of opportunity opened by turmoil and rebellious social behavior.
Groundwork for gay liberation originated largely from a group of activists who came together to improve the conditions of queer people. John Davinda describes a theory where being barred from participation ends up not creating an individual consciousness, and with this being a possibility, the actions of the gay liberation movement stemmed largely from the homophile movement, which curbed this and created a new group consciousness. While the politicization of homosexuality in the 1950s had seemed to be stagnant, multiple raids by the police and the defining of gay as a disease made it a necessity to fight against this homophobia. Donald Kinder and Cindy Cow state that the government plays a large part in creating acceptance of groups into the social norm, leading activists to push back against ethnocentrism through mobilization. Possibly the most critical figurehead of the entire gay liberation movement was that of Harry Hay, a homosexual, anti-governmental, politics-loving Marxist. Finding three men, defined by Linda Hirschman as two communists and one would-be fashion icon, the Mattachine Society was created. Naming themselves after people wearing masks, they were fueled by the ideas of communism and taking on the power that oppressed them. Being made primarily of communists, much of the social structure revolved around Douglas McAdams details, with different group structures leading to societal change. A similar structure arose around 5 years later, when another group, the Joggers Abilitists, became the lesbian counterpart of the Mattachine Society, who were both part of the homophile movement. But how did these ideas start to spread to areas where groups weren't available? After a successful lawsuit against anti-homosexual police brutality brought by the Mattachine Society, an idea emerged out of group discussion: start a magazine. There, one magazine was born, though separate from the society which it originated from. It was previous lawsuits like Roth v. US which helped to further its scope and eventually launched another magazine, The Daughters, The Ladder. This, in effect, was similar to the availability cascade described by Danielle Kahneman, though it took much longer to implement. With these said, it was just a matter of time before a slew of literature and groups formed, such as the Society for Individual Rights and Gay Liberation Front, as well as different literature like a Gay Manifesto and the magazine The Advocate.
This burgeoning movement needed gay men and women to see themselves as worthy of something worth fighting for. They needed legitimacy. According to John Gaventa, the deprivation of autonomy and subsequent oppression of homosexuals catalyzed a powerful rebellion for the gay liberation movement. Until 1957, homosexuality was clinically classified as a psychiatric disorder. This was weaponized as a legal justification for sodomy laws. While gay people were criminalized in 49 states, they were unable to pursue power through the conventional civil rights approach. Yet the experience of being queer was rife with discrimination. While Stonewall was a sensationalized climax of police violence and discriminatory rating, Iris Young argues that these mass experiences with homosexual discrimination activated a collective recognition of gay people as an oppressed group. Kinder and Cam claim that the self identity is shaped by perception of belonging, but the acceptance of one's self identity does not promise protection from discrimination. Gaventa emphasizes that the power of social legitimization is necessary to further the cognitive liberation of the gay movement. The formation of the Metropolitan Community Church by Troy Perry was especially important as the church served as a key to social approval through commonality and opened the conversation beyond legal equality. Other steps of legitimization included Playboy as a symbol for the hint of social acceptance for non marital sex, and in 1975, the media based Felon 6 strategy forced the repeal of California's sodomy law by strategically forcing authorities to attest that they were not enforcing anti gay laws. While these were all steps towards affirmation of love and work, gay people needed to do more. So they entered the game of the democratic process as a movement together.
Okay, so let's go into our fourth sphere here, which is change. Post Stonewall, there seemed to be a sort of plateau within the arc of the movement. Going back to Young's theory of seriality, Hirschman describes this time as a, quote, predictable pattern, where they were simply kind of coexisting within the oppressive system, but it lacked a bureaucratic organization that they needed to formally organize against the largest institutions in the country. And then AIDS strikes. So this is when we start to see the group really take shape. Young describes this as a group sort of infusion, and once a group forms and takes action, they begin to institutionalize. Basically, everyone needed to come out. Once people realized that they had an interest in protecting gay men's health, they knew that that was when they would see institutional change. Care out. They also wanted gay people to be seen taking care of each other within the media. They felt like this would appeal to the deep moral standards of society. Ultimately, the strategy proved very, very successful. It took some time, like any social movement does, but by 1985, the US Patent Office released its first blood test for the AIDS virus. This would not have been possible at all without efforts within the community to get the government to finally pay attention to their health. They finally realized that being left alone was not enough for their legitimacy, both socially and politically. As tragic as the AIDS crisis was, it was most definitely a super, super integral part into the liberation of gay people and finding their legitimacy through political power and social gain.